I know about you, you watch the television program, they make the man look like the bumbling fool, he's childish, he can even be outsmarted by a child, and he's always in trouble with his wife. What does true masculinity look like? We have with us Dr. Andrew Blackwood. He's a psychotherapist. Andrew, good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Greg.
Paul LaFrance, he's on television, home and gardening television. He's a man's man.
Oh,
I
think so.
Yeah, he can fix anything, inside, outside. And Brody Haight, newly married. So hopefully we can give you some advice and hear from you as well. Guys, good to have you here. So Andrew, why do you think, television was portraying the man looking always kind of like the guy that was always in trouble with his wife or bumbling around?
Well, for a long time it's been funny and it seemed harmless, but we know that it is actually pretty costly in a number of ways. But it's complicated. It is really complicated. I mean, we could do the pendulum swing and go from an image like that to an image where he is just him, defined by him. But I think the challenge is every man is going to look different. We were created to be different. So defining it and whittling it down to one thing, I think, would be the wrong thing.
You think, Paul, it went from the kind of the extreme where the man was always in charge and he was strong, he was out working, the Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you guys know Leave It to Beaver. I do. And Ward and June, right? And that the man was always in control, and there was the pendulum swing, and as Andrew said, it was funny.
Well, I think we have to understand even the deeper history, because that pendulum swing for years was on this side, which was culture and civilizations ruled by dominating men who are dominating out of a place of insecurity, mostly because they were physically stronger than women, and there was a necessary and required shift that had to happen. So suddenly now women are properly being recognized as equals, not underneath men, but in order to bring things to center, sometimes it has to go from one shift to the other. And so that's what we've seen happen. We've seen this male-dominated culture switch around to it being perfectly now okay to say something like, "My husband is so stupid. If he was to fall face first on the ground, he wouldn't have the sense to turn his head to breathe." Hashtag Brian Regan. And that's perfectly okay. But if a man said that about a woman, I mean, he'd be taken out before he got to his car in the parking lot. It would be completely unacceptable. So you understand why this has happened, because there has been this need for a shift, but the need to come back into balance is important for both sexes.
So Brody, for you, you go into a new marriage, you want to be a godly husband, right? So what have you been getting, not watching television perhaps on these sitcoms, Huntley Street of course, but what were you getting like in terms of some of the input so that you could be the husband that you want to be?
You know what? I find myself at home a lot cleaning, doing dishes.
As a man?
As a man.
Wow.
Doing laundry, and serving my wife and doing it as a pair and helping each other out. And you see complete different examples growing up, but now it's an equal thing, and it's awesome. It's just been great, Greg.
I like you said that, because I like doing the dishes too, and it's interesting because my kids have noticed that too. That a real man, will scrub the floor, and there's some defined roles, I guess, Andrew, in that. Okay, let's get to the real heart of this thing. What does a real man look like, and where should we go to find examples? On this panel, of course.
Well, right? I always like to look at Jesus as an example. We talked about him before as being an emotional person, but a strong person. And one of the things that he had right, which we all seek to do, is clarity about our purpose, our life mission. We talked about roles, but those roles are going to be different for everyone. So me, as a therapist, as a father, I was built to do what I do. I was built to be emotional. I was built to be expressive. It fits, it works. If I wasn't who I was, then I couldn't do what I was created to do. So my definition is going to look like this. It can still be strong, it can still be wise, it can still be vulnerable. But that's me, and I'm growing in comfort with that. Whereas another man, he obviously has a different call, so he's going to express that in experience and be that different. So I can't say what it's supposed to look like, but I can say when you start to realize it and become it and live it, it feels great.
Paul, one of the role models, and again, it's different in every family, but it's your dad. You look at how your dad treats your mother.
Dads are huge.
To me, that has been both a little bit of pressure that I felt I have to be, treat my wife properly. I want to do that, but I feel pressure because I want to show my kids what a real man looks like. But if there's been that distortion maybe in a broken relationship, or dad wasn't around, or he wasn't around, he was at work all the time, how much does that play into a young boy then growing into a man?
Well, I'm a very, very firm believer that women are created very naturally by God as nurturers, and men are created to be the instillers of identity and destiny. And that doesn't mean it can't be vice versa, but I think there's a definitive role that a man has in a son or a daughter's life. Now, I have 4 teenage daughters. Please pray for me. And, you would think that I would be, just having that factor, and growing up primarily with my mom and my 2 sisters, I've been surrounded by women my whole life. And it's been the greatest benefit to me to understanding what masculinity really is. And so, my father, who is now like one of the greatest heroes of my life, but when he was going through his dark times, his absence affected me a great deal, because we look to our dads to define what masculinity is in a very natural way. And if we don't have that, the next thing we look to is to women. Mm-hmm. We will look to a woman, particularly in that younger age, going from say 15 to 22, to define ourselves as men. And anything that is defining ourselves, or defining our own masculinity, that has anything to do with us, that has anything to do with our identity, our ego, will always fail 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to look at the proof of this, look at what men are drawn into. Mm-hmm. Like, what are the movies that we love? Yeah, we love those movies, like, there's like the classic, the Gladiators and the Bravehearts and like the Die Hards, but also like the Michael Claytons, right? So you're not on the battlefield, but it's a guy making a decision for something bigger than himself, even though the sacrifice is going to be to himself, something bigger than ourselves. That's the purpose. You can find the roots of what true masculinity is supposed to be in the things that we are inspired by.
How about in the Bible, Brody? We look at some of those. Now, they were flawed characters, like Moses, like David. That gives us hope. But you also have guys like Joshua and Joseph, who, at least from what we understand from the Bible, were men. Is that a place we should be going to?
Well, you know what? I can really relate to the story of what you said being a man is. And I really found myself being wrapped up in modeling in my appearance and
you look good, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Working out, all of these things, and I really made that about my identity. And I thought if I just had all of these things, and if I looked to the world image of what a man is, I would be fulfilled. But it's the complete opposite. I found not thinking about Brody and living inwardly and out towards the world, towards others, is where I truly found what my masculinity is. When I have somebody crying on my shoulder and I'm bearing their burdens, when I'm helping out my wife, when I'm knocking to meet my neighbors, to introduce myself and to ask them, is there anything I can do to help you? Being a service to my community, to my world, is where I really, truly found who I am. And that's living outwardly how Jesus lived.
So it wasn't so much I'm going to try to be, Braveheart or Jason Bourne or something. It's trying.
Right. Although that's cool.
That's cool. I want to jump off buildings.
And I did want to be that.
I want to wield a claymore sword like the next man.
Come on at you. So, in your practice, Andrew, do you find men coming in and they're a little confused about masculinity, depending on their circumstances and maybe the way they were raised or things they're exposed to?
Definitely. I think that's part of the experience for most people. I mean, there's no one book that tells you what your life is supposed to look like.
It'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So we talk about the experiences of the individual. We talk about the mindset, about the culture. What do you define manhood as? And when I ask people, okay, so describe it, sometimes they can't find the words, but other times what's left out is the whole range of life. They don't describe a baby, they don't describe an elderly man. But when you ask the question, is that man masculine? They stop and they think about it. So it's about reconfiguring our definitions, but then it comes back to what we were talking about. What are we called and created to do? When you tap into that service or that servant heart, we're relational. We kind of find ourselves and we realize I've always been this person. I've always been this man.
It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
It's buried right inside of us. I mean, my wife said something quite brilliant. She's in the room, so I have to say that. Quite brilliant. Years ago, early in our marriage, talking about this whole man being the head of the household thing, which is like, unfortunately, one of the most misinterpreted scriptures, as far as I'm concerned, in the history of the world. Right,
yes.
Right? It's like, I am the head of the house, therefore that means I get to have authority and hierarchy over you, which is just a twisting of masculinity. It's completely upside down. And where Jesus is like, he didn't say to the women, give your life for your husband. It's like, yes, there's this whole submission thing, which is debatable as to how we can get into a whole theological debate on that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, husbands, love your wife like Christ loved the church and lay your life down for her. Like, there's something about that. So back to what my wife said, she was like, you are the head, I agree, but I am the heart. And neither can survive without the other. Mm-hmm. But the difference is, and the reason why I immediately knew what she said was so correct, she said the difference is the head is the part that is most readily targeted in battle. That's the part that's targeted in battle. And therefore, that's where the stronger sex element comes forth, because it is in our DNA to be like, I can't survive without my wife. Like, it's very clearly put by anyone who knows this that I'd be in a ditch on fire without her within half an hour. But if anyone comes against her, it is in my DNA to protect my family, to protect my girls, even if it's just for her honor, or even. But there's a sense of protection that women need. But do you think, as a man, that my wife's not protecting me?
Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that women don't want the kind of bumbling fool that they see on television put down. One of the most important things I think my wife said to me, and it just stopped me in my tracks, because I work, in these countries where there's persecution and violence, and I said, I will die for you, just like William Wallace or, these guys. And she said, I know you die for me, but will you live for me? And I go, okay.
That's a tricky one, man.
Yeah. So Brody, you're, again, newly married. Are you getting good examples of what it is to be a man?
I am getting great examples right now. But I am, what I'm thinking is, back to the topic you said about the servant heart. I'm a deeply sensitive man, and from drugs and alcohol, I tried to turn that off, and I couldn't be who I was. But now finding who I am in my marriage, and letting that feminine side, what you would call feminine, I'm not sure, but that side coming out, that sensitivity of who I truly was that I was told I wasn't from the world, has really just been eye-opening and life-changing for me in my life. And the great examples that I have leading me now, and not following examples that I would see in the world from all these movies and these things we watch, because none of them worked. No. and I know.
And who says any of those emotions are effeminate?
That
Is
exactly.
a stigma classification.
Yeah.
A guy being sensitive and being in touch with his emotions.
And that's what I thought.
And crying at Disney movies means you're effeminate? I'm like, then I am the most female person in this room.
Well, I cry at the chick flicks too. Yeah. And my wife doesn't. She just always we're in a theater and watching a movie at home, and she feels the little tears. And I'm a real man, because when I played sports, I like to fight, so I had to prove it. Hey guys, thank you. This has been a great discussion. And we appreciate you coming in and talking about it, and we're going to continue to wrestle it. But I know that we want to be examples, to young men out there, and even some older men too that are struggling with that. And if you're kind of wanting somebody to talk to, give us a call on our prayer line, 1-866-273-4444, and go out and be a real man. We'll be right back.